This is start again. So welcome everybody to our Community Energy Conversations Spring Series. I'm Philip Coventry, Acting Co-Chief Executive of Community Energy England. Thank you for joining us today. We are grateful for your support and your attendance here. We hope you'll find today's event interesting, informative, stimulating. Whether you're an existing community energy practitioner or stakeholder, you're just getting started, or you're here to learn what community energy is all about. If we have anyone from council representatives, you're most welcome, and we value the input of everyone here today. For those who aren't familiar with us, Community Energy England is the membership network and representative body for community-led and owned energy organisations around the country. We exist to help community energy organisations connect with each other, such as you're doing today, overcome barriers and share learning. We also advocate on behalf of the sector with a strong track record reaching central government and other stakeholders to inform and influence them about community energy. This year's spring series of events is kindly sponsored by Unity. Unity was created as a partnership between Co-op Energy and Octopus Energy and is a well-known organisation providing services and support to the community energy sector. They buy the energy that the sector produces. They provide a community power tariff that puts community energy into consumers' homes, and they run a Powering Communities Fund that distributes grants back to the community energy sector. You can find out more about them at unity.coop, and we'll be hearing more from them today. So they'll be telling us about some of the other interesting work that they've been doing within the sector. Today's event is the final virtual event of the spring series. If you missed the first two events, they're now available to watch on our YouTube channel, and we will add the one today up as well in the coming days. There's lots of other events that we've been running over the last two and a half years online, all on our YouTube channel. So there's loads of resources and talks from different people in the sector, and lots of really informative stuff about sharing success and learning. So if you haven't been on our YouTube channel yet and you're interested in kind of learning more about the sector and understanding different things that are going on, then that's a great place to go for lots of information. In a few minutes, I will hand over to our first speaker, who is Michaela from Unity, and then Helen Seagrave, who will be leading today's conversation, will take over the chairing. But a few first bits of housekeeping. As I mentioned, please do use the chat function to talk to each other, but also you can use it to ask questions, share your comments and opinions on what people are saying. And behind the scenes, we have Charlotte, who's driving the Zoom, Flora, who will keep an eye on the chat and bring the questions out so that we can be asking them after each speaker. And Shannon, who will be tweeting throughout the event, and Kim's driving the presentation. That's the CEE team. We're also recording the session in case you miss anything, as I mentioned. So just be aware that you are, if you decide to show your face or participate in the chat, you're being recorded. And yeah, if you have a question, it will help to put a cue or something at the start, so it's sort of a question rather than a comment, and we'll try to make sure that we keep track of all of those. I know the chat sometimes can mean the questions get lost, so just if you indicate that helps us. And we have questions and answers time after each of the speakers, but obviously that time is limited, so we'll do our best to kind of pick from the questions that are asked. And I'm afraid if your question doesn't get asked, we apologise in advance, but we'll do our best to kind of curate those. We will have a short 10-minute break around 11 o'clock, so you can all get a cup of tea, etc. before we return to the conversation, and we're due to finish at noon. We'll try our best to keep to time. So yes, thank you again all for joining us today, and we'll get started. So as long as Michaela is here, can I see her on the list? Yeah, great, Michaela.
Yes.
Yeah, so to begin the session, I'd like to introduce Michaela, who is Head of Product and Origination at our sponsors, Unity, and she's going to talk to us about some of Unity's new initiatives. Over to you, Michaela.
Brilliant, thanks Philip. Hi everyone, nice to see everyone on the call. Yeah, I'm Michaela from Unity, so some of you may know me already. So Unity, as you know, is a community energy focused partnership, and on top of kind of the day-to-day job with PPAs, etc., we're trying to do some innovation work. We've got a really exciting new project being launched with Co-op Energy called PowerShare, which enables investment via your energy bill into community energy. So as part of that, it needed an independent community energy group to kind of function and allow the investment into community energy. So knowing kind of the next phase of community energy, we want to kind of transform it. We need younger people involved, the next generation for succession. We tried to have a real kind of key youth focus. And so we've created a new independent community energy group called Youth Empowered. And so we're very fortunate to have 4 directors under the age of 30, which is just fabulous. And so with that, I thought, rather than me kind of waffling on and talking about my experience, I'm not in my early 20s, so it might be more authentic to hear from one of our fabulous directors, Amelia Cryar, who is one of the younger members, and Amelia is also an employee of Co-op Energy, so I think it'd be great if you could hear from her directly. In terms of the slides, Phil, do you guys move them along?
Yeah, I'll be moving them along. So if you just say next slide, please.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Right, Amelia, over to you.
Amazing, thank you, Michaela. So yeah, I'm Amelia. I obviously work alongside Michaela with Youth Empowered. I'm 22 years old and starting my career out in community energy, which is super exciting. If you could go to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. And then next slide again. Thank you. So yeah, obviously we need to do a little bit of work in terms of injecting diversity into community energy. And why is this? It's because we continue to attract the same kind of demographics. And we kind of had to think as to why this is, and we came up with 5 main themes. This being time, money, knowledge, experience, and representation. And it's really interesting to think about these themes in terms of why we continue to attract the same demographic, but also in terms of barriers as to why we're not getting so many young people involved. Next slide, please. So I want to start by kind of going into the essence of young people and why we should be integrated into community energy a little bit more. So we are inherently curious, we are interconnected and influential, both within our social and personal networks. We are really, really driven and have the greatest cause of commitment to provide solutions for the climate crisis. So we really want to drive our careers in terms of impact and make the most amount of impact that we can. And we don't have time to do this today. However, I would really, really encourage you, if you have 5 minutes later on, to get a piece of paper and imagine a future where we don't engage young people in community energy. What does this look like and what does this feel like? And just map it out and see what you come up with. And then also, could you do this for imagining a future where we do engage young people as well? Again, what does this look like and what does this feel like? And then use this as your main motivator towards integrating young people into your community energy groups. Next slide, please. Perfect. So it's all well and good in us saying that we need to integrate young people in community energy, but how do we actually do this? What are the solutions? So we've taken the 5 main themes, and the first one being time. And it's really, really important that we communicate the internal and external value to young people as to why they should invest their time into community energy. So you could go about it in the sense of saying that it's CV enhancing, it will help people get jobs, help people get into university, but also really important to highlight the impact of community energy on the planet and their future. So community energy is obviously really special, as everybody here knows, because it provides a great solution to the climate crisis and also to the energy crisis that we currently face. And I can guarantee you, if more young people knew about it, more young people would be involved. So we just need to really communicate that it's worth their time to them. Next slide, please. Perfect. And then it's money. So obviously, the main kind of connection with money and community energy is investment. However, young people don't really have a large lump sum of money to invest. So how can we involve them and how can we kind of link that monetary aspect into it? So if you have got the money, please pay for their time. But sometimes we appreciate that that is not possible. So in return, maybe give something back to them that's not so monetary, but maybe some mentoring, some education in community energy, and share your networks. And the standard trajectory for careers at the moment isn't just applying for jobs normally, it's who you know. So if you can share your networks, that would be really, really useful and will really help leverage their career. Next slide, please. Perfect. And then the next is knowledge and experience. And these are intrinsically linked, so we've kind of kept them together. So one of the problems that we face with community energy is communicating the power of it and communicating what community energy is to people. And obviously social media is a key tool for this. And young people are all over it. We're so great at it. We know it inside out. We use it all the time. So really tap into the social media skills that we have. We also have good knowledge of local areas, so you can be really good at community engagement. And don't forget that if you want some more specific knowledge, you can approach maybe renewable energy apprenticeships, degrees, so bachelor degrees and master's degrees as well. Next slide, please. Cool, and then finally, it's representation. So one of the reasons why we're not attracting people in community energy today is because young people don't see themselves in these spaces. So we really need to amplify young people's voices in these spaces. So one suggestion that I do have is to ask advice from the young people in community energy today. There's not many, but please do, because the people that are in it really, really appreciate the value and are so invested in the cause, so would love to give their time, I can guarantee you, to help. And the second one is when you do have someone and treasure them, give them platforms to speak and ask for their ideas and actually implement them. We don't want it to be a tick in a box. We don't want it to be tokenism. Truly integrate their ideas into your strategies. Perfect. Next slide, please. And then please be kind. We are learning, we fail and we make mistakes, but we are such fast learners and everybody makes mistakes along their careers as well. So we've graduated, we come out of school, we're in our early stages of our careers in a time of such uncertainty. So we're used to being agile and we're used to kind of making things up and going along with the flow, which is such a key skill to have in terms of community energy and any kind of topic and subject as well. So I ask that you create a nurturing environment where young people feel welcomed and remind them that they deserve to be there. So often we feel intimidated in these spaces and we get imposter syndrome quite a lot. So make sure that young people feel valued and nurtured, and then they'll be much more comfortable in the spaces that we are in today. Next slide, please. Perfect. So a little bit annoying because technology has failed us today. But we had a little video from Max Tomlinson, who's one of the sixth form directors on the Youth Empowered board, but we are currently creating our social media channels. So keep an eye out for that and we will be posting that video of him soon. So yeah, hopefully you'll be able to see that not too long away. Next slide, please. Perfect. And again, we probably don't have much time to go into this. However, we've created a few different ideas of places that you can go, places that you can reach out to and circles people are in, where young people are present and would be interested in community energy. So if you want to take a photo of it, please feel free to do so. But yeah, just some ideas there. And with that, I shall hand back to Michaela.
Thanks, Amelia, that's fab. So in terms of everything that Amelia just said, the key part was also engaging with the local schools. So this community energy group, the location for the first project is in Wharton in the Cotswolds. So to kind of really focus on the youth engagement, we basically looked for the local school in the area, which is always kind of, you know, a central hub in a community anyway. So it's great to kind of engage. And obviously being, you know, having young people involved in the community energy group, and our idea was we would love to have some at the director level. It did need to be people over 16. So the local school had a sixth form, so it was kind of a fairly nice fit. So I just thought it might be handy to just do a really quick basic run through of the steps I took to engage with the school, just in case anyone wants to kind of follow, because there was a certain amount of patience. It's not a quick easy win. So it's as simple as obviously kind of stating the obvious, but pick up the phone. So I liaised heavily with the sixth form office manager, and I had several conversations with her at a really high level. So pitched it kind of, you know, at layman's terms, someone who's never heard of community energy before, didn't go into all the intricacies, but you know, community energy is fabulous. So in essence, it sells itself. So it wasn't kind of too much work from that perspective. But I think what was really key actually was we produced about 3 kind of slides that they could put up in their notice board with kind of engaging photography, just some kind of headlines. And from that, there were a couple of sixth formers that expressed interest. But again, that interest kind of never filtered through. So it's a real case of kind of keep pushing. And if this is something you want to do, I really recommend it. So based upon that, got in contact with the sixth form manager again, spoke about those that were interested. I spoke at an assembly. So I got to kind of do a real quick overview to the whole of the sixth form, which was fabulous. And then off the back of that, we had a couple of sixth formers really express interest. And we then undertook kind of individual chats with those sixth formers just to understand kind of their workload, exams. You know, we didn't want to put pressure, but also appreciate that it is a director role, there is work involved, and really trying to understand if this is something they really wanted to do. And to be frank, we did have a conversation with one student who quite clearly was just doing it for a tick box on his CV, which is okay, but we need some people that are engaged, and luckily there were other students that were absolutely. So we're really fortunate to have Max and Luca. But step by step, it's quite a simple process, but it did take time, and it did take quite a few phone calls. But I'm talking 5-minute phone calls here and there. So, but I definitely recommend it, and I do think it's worth it. And just a real quick shout out, because I know Paul's on this conference. Paul from Energy for All is also part of Youth Empowered, and he's been absolutely fabulous. So thanks, Paul. So I think that's us for us. Everything at this point from us.
Thank you very much, Michaela. Yeah. The program. Always. Coming back?
Yep, you're back.
Great, thanks. Sometimes happens. Okay, so yes, thank you very much from Michaela. I'll start that little thank you again. It's great to hear about this initiative with young people and what you're doing. Community Energy England will be pleased to share the learning that comes out of your project and help others with what you've just offered there, and developing that in terms of guidance for others who may wish to engage directly with schools and find other places and ways of bringing young people into the sector. So we will definitely be keeping up with Unity on that one. So now we're a couple of minutes behind, so I'll just swiftly hand over to Helen Seagrave, who is Interim Chair of CEE and Community Energy Manager at Electricity North West. Helen will be chairing the session today, so I'll let her introduce herself and continue on from there. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be facilitating the discussion of this final event of the Community Energy England Spring Series, which have taken place over the last 3 weeks. And I'm really looking forward to this morning's conversation. As Philip said, my name is Helen Seagrave. I'm the Interim Chair of Community Energy England, and I'm also the Community Energy Manager at Electricity North West. Electricity North West is a distribution network operator, or a DNO, for the northwest of England. And my role is to work with the community energy groups in our region to help them with their projects, but also to help develop and support the growth of the sector in general. And I'm very pleased to be part of this event this morning and hear about how the sector can develop. I think the community energy sector is at a very interesting and pivotal point. I've worked in the energy and environment sector for the last 20 years, and I can never remember so much public support and awareness for protecting the environment and eagerness to take part in projects that help take action on climate change. And at the same time, the increase in the price of energy has also brought into sharp focus the unacceptable conditions that many people face because of the price of energy. And I believe that community energy is really ideally placed to help society tackle both of these issues, as it's part of the communities, and it brings so much extra benefit to the communities where they're based. However, we all know that delivering community energy projects can be very challenging, and there are many barriers in the way. Hopefully, this morning we can have a good discussion about the future of community energy and how the sector can work to achieve its full potential. So we've got a great set of speakers lined up for you. Each one in turn will talk about their soapbox subject, and then we'll have a discussion, and at the end we'll sort of hopefully be able to draw a conclusion and have some closing remarks. So without further ado, I will introduce our first soapbox speaker, who is Ollie Pendrid, Chief Executive of Community Energy South and also a fellow Community Energy England board member. So over to you, Ollie.
I'm muted. Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Philip, and all the team. So I'm going to see if I can catch up on the time. and I was going to give my question that Philip and Helen asked me to answer was, how can the sector respond to the energy crisis, and how can that shape the future of the sector? And I'm going to cover sort of 4 areas. One is building partnerships. 2 is creating networks, community energy networks in local authority areas. Empowering energy champions to do sort of powering down energy advice work, and supporting new groups and clustering. And I've got a short presentation that I was going to show, which I can hopefully get up in a second, which is showcases some work that we're doing in Hampshire through the Community Renewal Fund with Hampshire County Council. So if you just bear with me a second, I will share my screen, and I hope that it's all going to work, which I think it is. Could you see that, Helen? Okay.
You need to put it on presentation view, but apart from that, we can see it.
Hopefully that's coming in now.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just going to run through this. Community Energy South, we are a regional umbrella network. We were established in between 2010 and 2013, where we mentored 12 new community energy groups in the Southeast. And those groups are now sort of, a lot of them are up and running. Some are still volunteer groups, some are very commercial and have, I think, over 50 megawatts of projects, well over 300 projects between them, and employ over 20 people through the sector, and are really established businesses now, like Besco and Avesco and others, Repower Balkan. So through Community Energy South, we combine engagement and behaviour change with community energy peer mentoring, and that's our Pathways programme. And a few years ago, a county came to us, Essex County Council came to us and said, we haven't got any community energy groups in Essex, can you help? And we developed Community Energy Pathways to do that, where we mentor new groups and support them to get established and create a network within the county. Now, we're also doing that across South Downs National Park, in Hampshire and in Surrey now as well. And we've also started to work with the North East and Yorkshire region to replicate the Community Energy South model. So, and this is about supporting the network and the community energy sector so it can grow and be more coordinated on a regional basis. So this is the example from Hampshire that we presented to the Hampshire 2050 board, which is leaders of the council and leaders from the Hampshire County Council and all the different districts. So this is funded with Hampshire County Council through the Community Renewal Fund, and which was part of devolved funding after Brexit and COVID to get communities up and running again, and links in with future levelling up funds and shared prosperity funds that are now becoming available for district and county authorities, and that's important. So and I'll share this deck afterwards with Charlotte and the team and Philip to share back, but we're supporting 5 community energy groups: Test Source Community Energy, Energy Alton, PCAN, which is Petersfield Climate Action Network, who have now set up a community energy group called Energise South Downs, and are doing really well, and they're a community benefit society. West Solent Community Solar, who are an existing long-term, they have a solar farm down in the Solent, down in the New Forest in Milton, and Loddon Valley Community Energy, which is up near Basingstoke. And we have a method for supporting them, but most importantly, we create a network, we bring them together. And so I'll cover that. So this is what it looks like, the map of Hampshire now. So these are the groups, which is a mix between the groups I've just described, but also new groups coming on. And the ambition is that every district or authority in this county will have a community energy group. So that's 12 districts and boroughs. So the ambition would be that we end up with 12 community energy groups across the whole county. And it's really important that we meet regularly with Hampshire County Council, and they've embedded this in their climate change strategy for the county, which means that they're coordinated. And we think this is a way to responding to the energy crisis and how we can shape the future of the sector, you know, by coordinating these networks. So one of our groups, Energy Alton, who I'm sure you all know of if you're in the sector, but you should have a look, are a volunteer group based in Alton, and they have a powering up and a powering down strategy. And it's something that we've really taken on board. So obviously, I don't need to explain to you what powering up is, you know, all the different initiatives and solar schools, and which Amelia was talking about, and I've sent you a note, Amelia, and EV charging and all heat networks and everything, but also about powering down and, you know, building reputation within the group, so energy awareness, fuel poverty support, home energy visits, and providing trusted impartial advice to communities. So I won't go into this slide too much, but you know, we have opportunities and challenges, and that's all about community energy and working through that. Two of the areas that, excuse me, 1 second, someone's just started hoovering outside my door, so I'm just going to ask them to stop. 1 sec. I do apologise about that. So I'm back. So the importance of this is that we're also working with new business models, and Riding Sunbeams is a project that we've developed across these regions to look at connecting community energy to the railways and directly connecting solar to the railways, which becomes community owned. And that's for that to unlock, we need to do a lot of lobbying, and we work with Possible, climate change charity, who are great climate change lobbyists, and also we need to target public procurement. And over the next few years, the rules around public procurement because of Brexit are going to change, and that's important to be more focused on net zero and social impact. And that's something that we're targeting with the railways and with the Treasury and government to look at for future procurement. And I think working in community energy with local authorities and the task at hand for net zero strategies is really important to consider procurement at a local authority level as well. And Communiheat is an initiative that we've developed with the DNOs and with UK Power Networks to look at a community-led plan for rural communities to go to net zero and the impact on the electricity grid. And again, we think that that's a real opportunity for community energy groups, particularly in market towns, to work with their local parishes and start to grow their outreach over to the parishes. So that's what we think is very important, particularly in market towns. Well done. Now it's not moving forward.
You've moved on to the next slide, community energy in Hampshire.
Oh, that's clever. Good, thanks. I've been through this, so you know the powering up and powering down is really important. And with powering down is supporting the energy crisis at the moment. So all of our groups in Hampshire have have started to develop energy advice. So a few of them have up to 7 volunteers each giving energy advice in their communities and powering up. And we see that each of those groups needs to get to a stage where they have a paid employee who supports the community energy group, but also coordinates the volunteers. So we're trying to target all of these groups in Hampshire that they have a paid employee around the area of £25,000 a year each, so that they can do the powering down and coordinate the pipeline for powering up. So this is one on this, where we in Hampshire, what we've done is created a network with the county council. So we meet about every 6 weeks with the county council, and the groups can tell the county what they're doing, and the county can tell the groups what they're doing, and both become advocates for each other. So they're really joined up, and that's again on a county level really important, and particularly linking up with the county's climate change strategies in their local area energy plans, so that together they can get to net zero together and look at opportunities. And then finally, just on partnerships for a region, it's really important that we develop partnerships within regions and within county levels. You know, obviously the energy hub, but also with the railways, with the DNOs for each region, because community energy is very aligned with the DNOs and their own goals, and that's a really important relationship. The skills lab at the bottom is a Department for Education initiative at the moment, supporting groups of sixth form colleges to develop skills labs and future jobs for the sector, and that's targeting net zero as well. And we're having really good conversations in Hampshire with the Fareham College Skills Lab, where they have 14 colleges, and we're having conversations with them now about setting up their own community energy group that is led by the students within the colleges. So I really want to have a chat with Amelia about that. Again, you know, our network, do get in touch, as well as with Community Energy England. We run regular webinars, and yeah, I think in summary, building those partnerships, creating networks in regions, working with your local authorities so that they're aware of the community energy groups in the region, work together, and with future devolved energy funds like the Levelling Up funds, and support new groups and clustering. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ollie. That was a great presentation, and it's always really interesting to hear what you guys are working on. And I think your question had 2 parts to it. So how can the sector respond to the energy crisis, and how can that shape the future? That's both in short-term and long-term actions, isn't it? And that many groups will be thinking about what they can do to help their communities before next winter, in terms of the heating costs that people are going to be facing for next winter. Is there any sort of advice you can offer them for some short-term activities they can do to help those in their communities that might be suffering immediately, whilst at the same time thinking about sort of the long-term changes that need to happen?
Yeah, look, there's a few things at the moment. There's a few funding bids that are coming out at the moment to support the sector to do that. So Big Green Week in September, everyone can apply for that now. It's up to I think £10,000 to do energy events for September, and that's going to be a really vital time. That's open until the 8th of May. So I recommend all groups to apply into that. And there are other funding bids as well. But otherwise, start to get your groups trained up if you're doing energy advice, and also talk to the retrofit industry, see if you can get retrofit advice as well. So I think that's really important. And I'm seeing more and more groups prepare for the winter. All of our pathways groups are, and link up with the DNOs. They do have funding for this as well to support outreach, most of them.
Yes, DNOs have an obligation and we're happy to help customers in vulnerable circumstances and with energy advice, and anybody who's eligible to register for the DNO Priority Service Register can also quite often access free energy efficiency advice as well.
And Helen, if I can just make one other comment, is
Yes.
over the last month, we've been to 4 different community events. One in Romsey at the weekend, where 200 people turned up from a community. The other one was West Harting, which is a rural community. Started at 7 in the evening. 150 people from a population of 600.
Wow.
And they were still there at 10:30 at night, building their village plan. So people are very engaged at the moment and need this support.
Yes.
And embedding energy champions into communities. It's a time to do that. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Ollie. Well, I think we'll move on to our next soapbox speaker now, who is Mark Luntley, who's been involved with community energy over many years, developing solar and wind projects. He's the director of a couple of community energy groups, as well as Community Energy England. So if you're there, Mark, would you like to start your soapbox presentation?
Okay, welcome. Hello, everybody. So my soapbox is about how do we help community energy realise its full potential. I thought I'd start by just saying what I think is wrong with the current energy system. It's expensive. I mean, we don't have to talk about that. It's not transparent. Profits go to large businesses. I mean, the FT today has a piece about record profits. And it's a model where we are asking citizens to pay more money to existing actors to go green. And as the FT reported a couple of weeks ago, the government top-down policy is, I think their phrase was, cowardly and incoherent. We've had a series of collapses of businesses, and in fact, government is out there at the moment looking for international funds to try and support the energy transition. So you think, well, and where is community energy in this? I think that the danger is community energy is relegated to what I would call the village hall. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's really important. But if that's all it is, that's all what we do, we leave 99.9% of the energy system unchanged. And so what do I think, to answer the question, what do we need? We need larger as well as smaller community energy. We now know community energy to be networked, it should be transparent, and it should offer principles like the cooperative principles, which are ones that go back well over a century. And what could it look like? Well, let's think and look across other parts of our European family. So in Belgium, community energy generator EcoPower is now the cheapest in the market. They generate their electricity and they sell it to their members. They're celebrating their 30th anniversary. They have wind, they have solar, they have biomass. In fact, we did a tour of their biomass project where local waste wood is used to both generate electricity and also to actually power the biomass plant. In Ennecop in France, with help from Greenpeace, they created a network of 61,000 members, 100,000 clients, 400 producers, 11 regional co-ops. And one of the things that really struck me about that was with the long-term power purchase agreements, 30-year power purchase agreements, so that the people buying the electricity have certainty over their supplies over that period. One of the newer projects coming along is in Spain, 127,000 customers. That's come about in the last 3, 4, 5 years, 81,000 members. And they're working with their members to use less electricity. And they're doing a lot of work with data, and they look at people in the same block of flats, and one person uses a lot more than another, and yet they've got maybe fewer people. And because they're a cooperative, they're owned by their people, they're a trusted intermediary, they've been working with people to make really big savings with their energy. If you look across in Germany, in Freiburg, Schönau, the local people there bought a part of their grid and worked on that. If you look at in Denmark, there more and more communities and cooperatives are buying and creating the district heating systems. And one of the big challenges over the next decade will be, how do we decarbonize our heating? And the danger is it is large actors in opaque models producing heat instead of people actually democratically owning that system. And I think an interesting final area is in offshore wind, huge investments in offshore wind across Europe. And much of that are the large businesses. And in Scotland, the government there made an emphasis. It wasn't just going to go to the highest bidder. They're going to make Scotland energy, as far as they can, energy independent, taking the whole issue really seriously with citizens' juries looking at how they decarbonise Scotland with over 100 recommendations. And one of the things they did was, when they did the auctions, they looked for a community element. And Energy for All, of which I am a director, is part of a consortium. There were a series of bids, and we won. Our consortium won 3 of the 5 bids that we submitted applications for, and that means that we will be looking to raise £150 million for 3 turbines, obviously 50 million each, on each one of those sites. And that will be that. And at the moment, we're asking citizens across Scotland how and what they want that ownership to look like. And if you look at Belgium, where they're working for a €440 million share offer over the next few years to work as part of a series of energy co-ops. And what I'd say is, energy is a basic right. I guess I'm talking to an audience who would see it. And co-ops are united in wanting a system. The nature of co-ops is where actually one of the principles is democratic control, and it's where citizens can take back control. They own the energy that they use. It's the same model that the original Rochdale pioneers adopted. And so what does this mean? To conclude, it means more, and my vision therefore is more and more people get energy from the co-ops in which they have a stake. So it's not just an energy transition, it's a democratic transition, and it's a financial transition. It's a model that we can see elsewhere is hugely popular. As I say, waiting lists of people to join co-ops, because the co-op sells the electricity it generates, and it can only create new generation at a certain rate. It links organizations together. It's part of a wider movement. So, for example, farmers' cooperatives in the Netherlands generating electricity by putting projects on their land. And in some in Asia, as I talked about, in Spain, very close, it's based in Girona. For those of you who know, it's close to Barcelona. So it's close to Mondragon, which is a big Spanish co-op. And we see lessons learned. So how did ResCooper, which I'm a director, come about? It came about because Enercop approached EcoPower. Enercop of France approached EcoPower of Belgium and wanted to understand how EcoPower had done work. And from that has created a network with 1.75 million members across Europe, across 1,500 or so co-ops. And what you see as well is a model where actually that lessons are learned. And I've finished with a final example. So Sominergia, which I say is one of these successful Spanish growing co-ops, was established by a Dutch community cooperative entrepreneur, Gisbert, sorry. And he helped create that, and he's now doing that same thing in Romania. So Romania is now creating some of these same models. So you're seeing a model that's democratic, citizen-based, and spreading and sharing those expertise. So as I say, what do we need to reach our full potential? But yes, we need those local projects, but we also need to think, how are we going to shift the energy system and create something where citizens have genuine control? Thank you very much. I see a whole series of questions.
Yes, we have got some questions, so I can help. put them to you now,
you.
but thank you very much. And I always find it really inspiring and interesting to hear about what's going on across Europe. So thank you for sharing that experience with us. So I'm going to ask 2 questions in one, which I know is what you should never do, but Richard Lane has asked that most of the things being done around the EU aren't possible here because of government policy. Does community energy therefore need to be more political, or not so much more political, more professional? And then one of the questions that we got in advance was Community Energy England has done well where it's had government support, and in Wales obviously there's a requirement for shared ownership. Would that kind of government support be a good thing to overcome some of those policy barriers that Richard's highlighted? So sorry for asking about 4 questions in one.
Okay, well, I'll try and address them. I think every country across Europe, when you tend to talk to people there, everybody said, well, of course, it's really hard here, not like over there. So there's always a temptation, everybody points to the other one. I remember talking to German people who bought the grid, and they say, well, it's not like Belgium, you know, where they do something Belgium. So well, we're not like Denmark. So there's a danger that we all pick out the problem. So for example, one of the things that's easier here is to raise capital. And a lot of our European colleagues say, well, you know, we find it really difficult, and our returns are linked to long-term gilts in the case of France. So, you know, actually, sometimes people look across at us and see things. So there are things that are there. I think it's certainly true. The UK Westminster government has not placed much emphasis at all on community energy, and the European Union has introduced a requirement for communities to be part of the energy transition. The UK government published a draft document which they then didn't complete and barely mentioned community energy. So I certainly think that there's a choice for community energy, which is about to what extent do we engage with government behind the scenes to lobby and to advocate for community energy, and to what extent do we have to be more visible and actually make the case more publicly, and there are, you know, arguments either way. I think shared ownership is really an important thing. One of the things that we do see is that across the UK, local authorities are announcing climate emergencies and their own targets. I mean, we are a very centralised country, but there is the potential for that. So if you look at in Oxfordshire, where the Low Carbon Hub and my former employer, Oxford City, has given a loan to the Low Carbon Hub, and that helps them build more projects because they can raise the capital after the project's built, which is great. And you're seeing in the city of Edinburgh, which is an Energy for All project, where the local council has worked with the community energy project, and they're putting solar panels across buildings. And the schools energy co-op is another one, built 87, Paul will correct me if I get it wrong, 87 roofs, including the cathedral at Salisbury. So there are models there, and you're seeing that happening a lot more. I mean, just round the corner from us, the community in my village built a 4.5 megawatt solar farm, and the council has stepped in and used and has replaced some of the expensive borrowing. So the council gets a better return on its cash balances, and the community doesn't have to pay as much. So there are all sorts of different models around working there. So yes, more community ownership from local authorities, but doing so in a way that just doesn't mean councils just become large developers. And there is a view amongst some councils which is, oh, you know, we are the community, so we'll build it and we will run it and the money will come back to us. I would actually argue for a different model where citizens and the councils work together. I've rattled through there.
No, and it was interesting to see the perspective, like you said, European countries looking to us where it's actually is easy to raise finance. And my limited understanding of the energy industries in the different European countries is they're all structured slightly differently. So like the DNO footprint in different European countries is slightly different. So in some countries it's easier to do certain things than it is in others.
Yeah.
But talking about finance, one of the questions we've had in is, to what degree is the attitude of the FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority,
Yes.
CBS, but I'm sorry, I don't know that acronym, a barrier to growth and scale. So I don't know if you could explain the question a bit as well.
I need to tread a little carefully. There are two forms of cooperatives in the UK. There are member co-ops and there are community benefit societies. Westmill, which I chair, and Westmill Solar, which I'm also a director, are member co-ops. And I think they are, in many cases, the right model for communities, because the people actually own their share of their project and they get to decide how it's done. The alternative is called Community Benefit Society, where the benefit goes to the community and people are effectively lenders into the project. They get a rate of return and any surplus beyond that goes into community goods. The FCA, for reasons which we don't agree with, have said community energy projects cannot be genuine member co-ops because they do not sell directly to their members. There's not a direct trading element as there is with mid-counties, for example. Now, Westmill, for example, and Unity have worked with us on this, have introduced a system where our members do buy our electricity and they get a return not only on their investment, but a reduction on their electricity bill as well, a dividend. But at the moment, the FCA have not registered and haven't registered for a number of years. It must be 5 or 6 years now, any new member co-ops. And so that is a challenge which we think needs to be addressed. So that's the role of the FCA. I mean, I think there are all sorts of different things here, but it is important that we work well. The question there is Ripple a member co-op? Yes, it is. It was registered because it's the first of those sorts. There you go.
Thank you very much. We've only got a few minutes left before the break. I'm just going to try and turn a couple of the comments into questions. So Mary's commented about vulnerable customers and how does your vision potentially help those that do need help with their fuel bills? So linking back to what Ollie was talking about in the first instance.
Well, I think I think there's two parts to this, and there's no perfect answer. One of the reasons that energy is expensive is because it is based around fossil fuels, and fossil fuels have gone up. I mean, so the faster and more effectively we make an energy transition to things like renewable energy, and we've all seen those graphs with the costs of solar and wind coming down and down, the faster we will come to a system where energy or electricity is more fairly priced. The second issue is that as I said, some of the community energy projects across Europe offer some of the cheapest electricity. And they do so because, for example, the likes of EcoPower have a 3-to-1 salary ratio. And if you look at the salary ratios and the cost ratios in some of the big businesses, I mean, was it Shell was today saying they've made record profits in this last quarter. That's not all. I'm not arguing, I'm not making an anti-capitalist argument here, but clearly those sort of models with very large amounts of money being taken out at a distance, and the model that I'm talking about, which is lower cost models, where actually the electricity is used locally and the money is raised locally. So for those of you who've been following the cooperative model, the sort of Preston model, where actually the money stays in the area, is also something. So the democracy stays in the area, the energy stays in the area, and the money stays in the area. So that's sort of what I would talk about. And then you can talk about actually, if it's democratically controlled, you can then have citizens saying, well, actually, how do we reduce that energy? And I'd use that Soenergia argument, where they have actually worked out where some of their members, vulnerable members particularly, are using excess energy, and EnerCop have done a very similar model out of actually energy saving with their members. So that's one of the things that's actually been really quite active.
Yes, to put an academic term on it, it's community wealth building. My local authority, Salford, subscribes those principles as well. Right. Well, thank you very much, Mark. That's been a very fascinating discussion, and there are quite a lot of comments in the chats box as well, with people contributing. So we've now got time for a 10-minute break, so everyone can go and stretch their legs and do whatever else they need to do, and we will see you back here at 11:10. So thanks very much, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a good break and you've managed to get back to your screens. I'd like to introduce our next soapbox speaker. We're going to hear again from Michaela. I hope she's made it back from the break so she can talk to us now. Thank you for putting your camera on. So I will hand over to Michaela, who can talk to you all about her soapbox. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant, thanks Helen. Yes, so my soapbox question is, what are the skills and or is the capability needed to transform smaller community energy organisations into larger capacity groups? So, I mean, it's quite a difficult question because I absolutely won't profess to know all the answers to this. And as you all are aware, every group is so different. But I really enjoy my role at Unity. Obviously, it's in community energy. And one of the real kind of perks of the job is that we get to speak to community energy groups up and down the country, from big to small. And we currently work with about 200 community energy groups. So from that, obviously, I get to observe and hear lots of interesting stuff. So hopefully I can share some insight from that perspective. And also in my personal capacity, I'm in the Youth Empowered community energy group that we touched upon earlier, which is newly formed. So we're still at the very much the smaller stage. So I can absolutely see the challenges ahead. And I'm also part of another newly formed community energy group. I think I've got the bug, as a few of us have. And that one's called Energise Leamington. And again, that's in the very early stages. So yeah, I'll just share some kind of my thoughts and observations on how to kind of grow community energy groups. I guess firstly, it's not easy, and not every group will actually want to transform and become a larger organisation. And, you know, that's okay. If that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine. But I think all of us here are probably, you know, we're huge fans of community energy, and we all know we desperately need more renewables to transition away from fossil fuels. So I think by transforming smaller groups to larger groups, by very definition and default, that will mean more renewables, more community energy, which is absolutely a good thing. So hopefully there are lots of groups that want to transform. So I think I could start off with a really easy kind of suggestion. Obviously, if you can utilise, pay for any extra support, that always helps. So obviously with Youth Empowered, we have Energy Full support, and Pure Leapfrog have lent some support with Energise Leamington as well. But I'm guessing that would be a bit of a rubbish soapbox if I just suggested people pay for resource, because that's obviously not possible. So I guess the area that I probably feel most passionate about, and it's already been touched upon, is the use of volunteers. And I know there's only so much reliance you can put on volunteers. It can be time intensive, but I guess if I just share a few anecdotes from my own personal experience. So I've worked in the energy sector for 13 years. I've only been in the community energy world for a year. And when I first started in community energy from a Unity work perspective, I really wanted to join some local community energy groups. And I reached out to local groups, and obviously this is not the same, and it varies across the sector with various groups, but I tried to engage with a few groups, got their email addresses on the websites, tried to do it from a personal capacity, not through work. And I just didn't hear anything back. And not that I think I'm the bee's knees, I'm absolutely not, but because I've got energy experience, I'd like to think I could give something to some groups. So I guess my first suggestion is, if someone inquires, it can't, I appreciate we're all there's a lot of volunteers, we're on time constraints, but just explore what their skills and capabilities are, even if it's just on your website. If you've got, an inquiry form and they can put one sentence. So for instance, there could be a social media student, or they could be a project manager, an engineer. But I think if you just kind of get an email saying, hi, I'm Dave Jones, it can be quite easy to dismiss without actually seeing what the capabilities are. And I think from speaking to some groups, it does seem to be a bit of a missing trick. And the common feedback I hear is, well, I haven't got time to manage volunteers. And I absolutely get that. But I guess my point is, unless you kind of know what their skills and capability are, you don't know if you will need to manage them. So, for instance, if someone is, again, an example of a social media student or whatever, you probably won't need that much time or resource. Or you could be speaking to someone who happens to be you know, a PV engineer. We just don't know. So my first kind of suggestion is just really explore that area if you can. And I think it's just a real shame, because if people do express interest, we don't want that interest to be muted. If they engage and hear nothing back, then they might focus on the next kind of sustainability passion. So if there's any way to kind of log that interest, maybe go back to them when they've got a bit more time, I think that would always be helpful. And then I think it also then feeds into what myself and Amelia spoke about earlier in the session, was engaging with younger people. At Unity, we actually completed a survey. The demographic was 16 to 13-year-olds, just to say, you know, have you heard of community energy? How would you like to get involved? And the feedback was really interesting. And I think quite often you hear that people think, oh, I want to get involved through investment or being a director, but the number one suggestion of how they would like to get involved in community energy is through volunteering. Number 2 was education, and number 3 was internships. So that's definitely kind of an area to consider. And then in terms of, I guess, capability, that part of the soapbox question, from, again, observations, I think social media capability, content creation is really key to helping transform community energy groups. I think sometimes, you know, preaching to the converted, we know it's fab, but it can be a somewhat hidden secret if you don't know about it. So it's kind of, you know, shout about it, let people know you exist. Community energy is wonderful, it does lots of fabulous things, so why not shout about it? And obviously this in turn should hopefully attract a wider volunteer base and people interested in your group. But also I think it can attract as well the interest of corporates. So for instance, we know to kind of help community energy groups grow, money and investment is always helpful. And we're seeing the rise of corporate PPAs, so they can provide long-term kind of price security when doing a cost stack or a financial model for a project. So from working at Unity, and we recently did a deal with Patagonia and Energy Garden, I think one of my main takeaways from that was seeing, I guess, the work that Energy Garden do. I don't think they're on the call today, but it's that content creation. It's not just showcasing, yes, we've done a solar installation, yes, we've done, you know, completed a wind turbine. It's the full picture. So why is that better than a private kind of company doing that? It's the extra surplus profits that go back into the community, as we all know. So that could be fuel poverty, education, any kind of videos, imagery, content creation can really help with that. And I think with some, for instance, if you wanted to work with like a B Corp, you might have one that's really engaged and you're speaking to the sustainability manager, but they're going to have to sell internally the fact that a corporate PPA for them is going to probably mean that energy costs are going to be a bit higher. Maybe not at the moment because the market is crazy, but in normal times, it could mean their energy costs are higher. So you've got to kind of convince the CFO, head of procurement. So if you've got any kind of content, videos, imagery that can kind of support the wonderful work that the community energy group are doing, then that will absolutely help. And in turn, should help secure extra revenue, which goes without saying would help a community energy group. So I guess my takeaway is, you know, so many groups are doing such fantastic work. So just don't shy away from shouting about it, because it is fabulous. And I think as well, the last thing is obviously grants. And I thought it might be a good chance to plug Unity have a Powering Communities Fund, and that's open to our community energy partners. Next one's open in the summer. But from looking through previous successful applications for that, Brighton Energy Co-op a few years ago, they were awarded a grant to use the money towards internships, paid internships for 3 people for about 100 hours worth of work. So it's also kind of, you know, if there is grant funding available, can that be applied for kind of short-term internships? Because obviously if you can allocate resource to a project paid, then that can absolutely help with the transformation and help in turn to grow. So and then I guess lastly, from my experience at Energise Leamington, using the resources that the groups have out there, the knowledge sharing. So from Energise Leamington, I've joined the Community Energy South ones that Ollie and the team do, the business, how to do a business model. There's the Community Energy England resource pages. So it's kind of, there is so much stuff out there. And I think we can just obviously utilise all that to try and help it it grow. So there's obviously not an easy answer. There's not a kind of a simple model because it is complex, but yes, I think there's lots of things we can do, and I definitely feel passionate about the volunteers.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to any questions that people have got time still to submit some, can I ask you to explain, you used the term B Corp organisation when you were speaking, and can you just explain a little bit about what that means, because I think it's significant and I'm not sure everyone would have understood.
Yeah, absolutely. So B Corp is it's a bit of a movement now, and I think it actually stands for I can't remember what the B is. It benefit? I should know that, but anyway, it's a way that companies can sign up. So if you've got excellent ethics, values, sustainability at your heart, and you can really demonstrate that it's embedded in every part of a corporate culture, from procurement to employment hire, every kind of stage of a corporate's operation, then you can apply to be a B Corp, and it's kind of like an excellent rubber stamp. And you if you see the logo, you would recognize it. It's a circle with a B on it, and it's basically a nice sign to say benefit corporation. Thanks, Amelia. It's basically a sign to say, you know, sustainability is at our heart, and we absolutely are doing the right thing. And so, for instance, Patagonia is a B Corp, Pucker Herbs, there's a number of B Corps out there, and they obviously lend themselves nicely to the ethics and values of a community energy group, because, you know, we don't want community energy to be used as a bit of a greenwashing tool. But so there's a nice alignment there.
Thank you for that explanation, because it's the point that one of the selling points of community energy is the embedded community benefit. And if you're talking to an organisation that has already done that themselves, and there should be a good match of ideals, and yes, an easy sell. And you also touched on the interns and the paid internships being a useful thing that community energy groups can do, linking back to your earlier presentation about youth, getting younger people getting involved, and you pointed out your fund has been a good way of people doing that. A few people are making comments about volunteers and how it can be difficult and necessary to engage volunteers. I mean, do you have any other ways that people could potentially get resources in to support people's time and effort in community energy?
Yeah, I think it's more from my own experience, and I think if we talk about Energise Leamington, for instance, that's a newly formed group, and we've got a number of volunteers, and the calibre of volunteers is kind of insane, actually, when you look around the room. And so it's more from that perspective. And I've spoken to a number of groups who kind of, when they get inquiries about volunteers, just dismiss it as we haven't got the time. So I guess I was trying to stress that one of those volunteers, if you have a 30-second chat, that could actually be someone who wants to volunteer, maybe has been, I don't know, a teacher, a senior lead or whatever, and they can help with internships. So it's kind of the knock-on impact. If you don't explore it at that first hurdle, then how do you know? So it's kind of the chicken and the egg, but I totally appreciate it is really difficult, and there is stuff out there, and I can see some of the comments coming through. So
yeah, but sometimes it can take quite a lot for somebody even just to make that initial step, and if they're put off straight away, it might put them off volunteering for a long time. So I'm going to ask you this question that Ollie's asked, but I want everyone to consider this question. So Michaela, if you try and answer, but this is for everyone to consider. So how can we get every group that wants to grow a paid energy champion and an employee to coordinate the volunteers? Because I think it does make a difference to have that paid resource, so somebody can sit down and do it during the day, as opposed to fitting it around their other jobs. So have a go answering that question, but I'd also like everyone to think about that. I think that's a key question.
I mean, I totally agree, and I think it'd be fabulous if every group could have that, and I wish I had the kind of the golden answer, but I think that's when it's kind of, we have to be realistic about the size of some groups, and the smaller ones, the newly formed, etc., aren't realistically going to be able to have that at that point. So I think to have that as an ambition is absolutely fabulous. But you see kind of, especially with the larger ones, you see the local authorities that have declared a climate emergency, they are tending to look to the community energy groups in some areas to almost solve the problem for them and use their resource. So I guess my first thought would be that's a natural kind of you scratch our back, we scratch yours. If the local authority wants to utilise the fabulous work that the community energy work people have done, then can they support through And I guess the other point to mention as well is there are our community energy apprenticeships out there. So we're working with a company called Impact Academy through our parent company Octopus Energy, and there are 6 community energy apprentices. So they do it as part of, they have their normal day job, but they have 1 day a week where they can support a community energy group. And I think that apprenticeship is, it's Octopus Energy have signed up to it, but it's a standalone body, Impact Academy, that are running it. And so again, if hopefully that grows, maybe we can promote that, then there's smaller links that maybe people can utilize. But again, just as an anecdote, some of those apprentices I know reached out to some various groups and didn't hear back, and that was kind of free resource that could have been. So I don't know, it's really difficult, isn't it?
It is, but I do think I've heard of a lot of local authorities creating climate officer posts, which I think if you can find that person within your local authority, they are probably, to put it bluntly, looking for things to do to help, for them to help their local community with climate change. So potentially a resource there for community energy groups to work with. So one more question related to sort of education. So someone's asked, you mentioned people want to get involved in education as well and volunteering, and they've asked for you to define education, I presume, in case anybody wants to look at that. So did you have a particular sort of level of education in mind when you mentioned that?
Yeah, so that came from the volunteering kind of survey. Well, it wasn't actually a volunteering survey, it was a survey to a young demographic just to find out if they knew anything about community energy and various questions, and one of them was, how would you like to get involved? And education was put as a loose topic, so as a topic in that context it wasn't defined, but from feedback and from speaking to some people, it's more kind of, how can they knowledge share? And especially with the younger demographic, it's that whole kind of climate anxiety, what can we do to help? So is it going into schools, like some community energy groups do, like Repowering London, going into primary schools, showcasing what community energy is, the empowerment it gives. So it's more from that angle rather than a set.
Okay, thank you very much. And one last question before we move on. Should all community energy businesses, groups, depending on what you want to call them, be looking to employ a full-time employee and give people jobs? What do you think about that? Oh,
if there many is there, absolutely. That's fantastic. And I think that should be the aim for all community energy groups. But also appreciate there might not be there, so it's not possible, but yeah, completely agree.
Cool. And because you gave your funding a plug, and great minds think of we've also got funding called Powering Our Communities, which is due to launch, and that's there for community groups in the Northwest to build their capacity and could be used for sort of to get some resources into groups, to get them some time resources as well. We should be launching ours again soon.
Will you share the link of that, Helen?
Yeah, I will do once it's available. Yeah,
brilliant.
No problems
Thank you.
at all. Thanks, Michaela.
Thanks.
Right,
all.
That's great. Thank you very much. That was really insightful. Okay, so now we'll move on to our last soapbox speaker, who is Kate Gilmartin, who works as a community investment manager for the Northwest Local Energy Hub. And if Kate's there, I will hand over to her for her soapbox.
Great, thanks Helen. Hi everybody, and thanks for Community Energy England for putting this event on. Just a quick bit of background. So I've been delivering the Rural Community Energy Fund in the Northwest, and we've got 21 projects up in the Northwest at various stages of development, including community low carbon heat, solar of various scales. We've got high and low head hydro, wind, and EV car clubs. So there's a lot going on, and that's a really great resource for us to draw on and to share that information. So I've been tasked with the question, is innovation and delivery of non-traditional business models the best way for community energy organisations to support transformative change in the energy sector? So quite a big question, and I'm going to tackle this question in parts. So firstly, innovation and delivery of non-traditional business models, and how well suited are community energy organisations to develop and deliver? Well, personally, I think community energy has been born from innovators and social entrepreneurs. And what makes community energy groups innovators? Well, people who are involved in community energy tend to have a deep understanding of our global issues of climate change. And they decide to roll up their sleeves and think global, but act local. And that's where groups look at their locale and what they can do right there. Whereas developers will scope a number of projects and then work with the ones that are most likely to succeed, usually at the lowest cost, communities will assess what potential projects they have on their doorstep, and they will persist in the development of those projects, come what may. And I think it's these very different starting points where community energy groups will persevere and think round all the obstacles they face and do some innovating. And I think Communiheat and Riding Sunbeams are perfect examples of this locale-based innovation. What about social entrepreneurs? Well, the Community Benefit Society investment raising model in itself is a non-traditional business model. And it's a social enterprise too. And that's really key when we start to think about the coming changes and how, as social enterprises, we need to position ourselves to be ready to implement and deliver. So in answer to the first part of the question, yes, I do think community energy has got really good credentials for tackling the energy transition through its experience of innovation and non-traditional business models. But what about transformative change in the energy system? What does that mean? Well, we're barreling at high speed towards the digital energy revolution. It's been underway for some time, but it's really gaining momentum. And just consider for a minute the telecommunications and your old house phone in the 1990s, early 1990s, and then consider your smartphone and the capability that has. This is the type of revolution that the energy system is going to go through, and we're just at the beginning. But where will the benefits go? I think community energy will have to stand firm, get its elbows out, and think hard about trying to maximise the benefits that go to our communities and households rather than the big players. So what does transformative change in the energy system look like? And I'll just put a caveat here, I'm not an energy systems specialist. And these 4 areas that I'm going to mention are not an exhaustive list. But these are 4 areas where I think community energy can do more to engage, support and deliver. And I know that a lot of work has already gone on in this space, and a lot of community energy people have been thinking in this area already. But firstly, the flexibility market and the revenues that that will generate. So this is going to be a big part of the future energy markets as energy is digitalised and the grid is balanced in real time. So, for example, there's a website out there called Social Energy, and that is essentially putting systems in for £6,000, so 4 kilowatt peak solar array and battery. They can either the household can either fund it themselves, or I think they have loan options. But essentially, Social Energy is using that battery, and they are looking at utilising that for flexibility. So this is all pretty complicated stuff, and you've got different forms of flexibility. So, for example, there's fast frequency response, there's dynamic containment and grid balancing, and there's a lot of smart software that drives all this. But community energy has got the ability to understand what's currently out there and how to apply that to community energy. So things like Social Energy, what are they doing? How are they doing it? And how can that model be replicated in a community energy setting? And it's aggregation of these flexibility assets that's really key. A great project is the Together Housing solar and storage project that was ERDF funded. And essentially they paid again for solar install and battery. But they aggregate all those batteries and they get £110 per household per annum for that flexibility services. So what are the main benefits that will arise from the aggregation? So there's things like household batteries, you've got smart water cylinders, and in time, there'll be things like vehicle to grid electric vehicles. And this is where community energy really needs to assert itself and highlight the fact that it is unique in this market. Community energy has a respected voice within communities. It's a trusted messenger. It's got great networks and a really broad reach. And community energy is a social enterprise with a non-profit business model. And that's a really great badge to flaunt, you know. So going back to very localized solutions, we mentioned Communiheat. Basically, what does a net zero system look like? And how do we get there? Everything's got to happen within the constraints of the grid. The grid can clearly be reinforced, but that takes time and it takes cost as well. And we've got to look at the lowest cost achievable to decarbonise the grid and minimise those costs of reinforcements. So we need to look really local at substation level at how we're going to use low carbon technologies and how they're going to be dynamically balanced. And that has to be done through a community approach, not a piecemeal approach. And this community-based approach is exactly where community energy sits. And I think we've already mentioned, but the social value as well. So we've got an energy and cost of living crisis. Community energy is full of social entrepreneurs who are committed to net zero, but also committed to that transition being an equitable transition. Many groups are engaged in energy efficiency and fuel poverty already, and sadly that work's becoming even more challenging. So that's just 4 examples where community energy should really be getting its elbows out, getting as involved as possible and complementing what's already happening out there, but really putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is the added value that we bring. So this flexibility market and the aggregation of the flexibility, the local, very local substation, so things like Communiheat, how are we going to do that grid balancing at a very local area? What are the community solutions rather than the individualised solutions that's going to allow us to get the lowest cost net zero as possible, and that added value from the social value. As we see these markets emerge and the benefits of digitalisation of energy becoming available in this domestic setting, who is going to scoop the benefit? I think the key is who is going to be aggregating. You know, players like Centrica are stepping in, but are they going to pass on the benefits to those individual households? Currently, the benefit is going to, at household level, is going to go to early adopters, people who are tech and energy savvy, or people who own their own EVs. Certainly people on a prepaid meter are absolutely locked out of this market. And how are we going to change that? Ofgem have tasked the DNOs to think about this, how the value of flexibility can go to households, and how do we help that to happen? So, for example, there's a project we're working on in the Northwest. It's a community energy 5 megawatt solar project, ground mounted solar project. And we've just been told by the DNO there that actually, due to reverse power, we're going to be curtailed at 2.5 megawatts. And we're looking at doing potentially doing a innovation scheme to look at whether we can use smart water cylinders or retrofit smart plates to existing water cylinders, working with Mixergy and Newcastle University through potentially, hopefully through the Strategic Innovation Fund. And the idea there is that if we can get 750 people within the community to either adapt their cylinders or to install a smart water cylinder, then that could give us 2.5 megawatts of flexibility that would allow us to get to our full capacity of that solar farm. This community group that we're working with has already got solar on the primary schools in the area, is incredibly well networked, and they are very well placed to take on this type of project. Whereas looking at this project through a different supplier lens, I don't think there'd be that that ease to get the technology into the community to allow that flexibility to happen. So it's a really good example of where a community can use its existing networks to take on innovation. So is innovation and delivery of non-traditional business models the best way for community energy organisations to support transformative change in the energy sector? Yes, definitely. It's got extensive networks that are adept at sharing ideas and knowledge to see what's out there, what's working, and how we can adapt existing models for community energy. Community energy has a strong history of mobilising local investors to raise capital via share issues, or potentially working with local authorities to develop community municipal bonds that can look at delivering solutions like social energy, or together housing, solar storage project, or indeed things like people-powered retrofit. We need to start having conversations with the local authorities in light of the energy and cost of living crisis, and ask how they are looking at delivering mechanisms that are going to help ease this crisis, or indeed suggesting delivery models that community energy can bring forward. The energy sector is going through transformative change. There will be a lot of people vying for market share to claim the benefits, but the community energy sector has a unique offering and must ensure its voice and solutions are heard and, more importantly, implemented to ensure the people who need to benefit the most are getting those benefits. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you very much, Kate. That was great. There were some fantastic examples in there of what's going on. I'm just having a look to see if we've had any questions that come in. So there's a question from Simon. So that's great, but whilst the excess 2.5 megawatt going to power immersion heaters, is that going to be inefficient and work against later addition of heat pumps? And is it really going to be cheaper than fixing the grid? So if you talk a little bit more about that example, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose the key here is that these water cylinders are smart. So I'm not talking about the retrofit on existing water cylinders, but the actual water cylinder itself, it heats at the top rather than the bottom. And it also only heats, it uses AI, and it will start to understand your pattern of usage. So it will only heat as much water as it thinks you're going to need for a day, which essentially means that you've got additional charge in that water cylinder most of the time, and the grid will know how much charge each cylinder has at any given moment, so it's able to dump according to what charge is available. So yeah, I think it would be a lot cheaper than fixing the grid. Obviously you want people to install the technology first. The benefit for them is that every time the water cylinder is called on for flexibility, they get a free tank of hot water. I think from a social perspective, what's quite interesting with this model is that a free tank of hot water, yes, you can put a price on that, but where people this winter potentially aren't even going to have the heating on and can't afford to have a hot water cylinder, a tank of hot water, you know, a free hot water tank is going to go a long way from nothing. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something that certainly we're only at the very early stages of concept at this project, and really we're looking at it because the DNO have said we're going to curtail you, and we hadn't thought about, well, that wasn't going to be an issue originally, and with hoping that this is a potential solution. We have a long way to go because we've not even talked to the community about who out of the entire community wants to have a smart water cylinder or a retrofit. How many people in that community are on combi boilers? How many water cylinders are actually within that community? So it's only really early days, but I think what's interesting is the fact that it's the aggregating ability and where that benefit goes. You know, I don't want communities just to get a free tank of hot water. I want them to be able to have more from the benefits of that flexibility as well.
Yes, and I think if there's two principles to pull out there. One is that maximising on-site use of your energy is the best value for it, because you're displacing having to import and pay for imported energy, whether that's heat or power. And then the flexibility that the grid had is provided by people who are connected to it. So when a distribution network operator goes out for flexible services, we're looking for customers to be able to turn up or turn down their demand at the time required. So you need to have a flexible system to be able to respond to that requirement, and a hot water tank can give customers, or a group of customers if we're talking about a domestic situation, that ability to provide that flexible service that the network potentially or may require. So yes, are there any more questions, and or would any of our other speakers like to make any comments in response to what Kate or anyone else has talked about this morning? Okay. Well, I think if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the closing remarks. So I think we've had a fascinating conversation this morning. We started off hearing from Amelia and Michaela about their initiative to engage young people through their new organisation, and also the benefits of getting young people involved. In Electricity Northwest, we have funded a number of projects to support young people to produce videos to engage their peers about, and other members of their communities about, climate change. And I'm always inspired by their ideas and their enthusiasm and their willingness to get involved in this. So I would really recommend groups going out there and trying to talk to the young people in their communities, because it is definitely a good source of knowledge and resource, but also inspiration. And thank you also to all of our Soapbox speakers. I think we've discussed some timely topics this morning. So firstly, from Ollie, we heard about how he's working across with community energy across the southeast, but how community energy is well placed to help tackle the current energy crisis, both with short-term support so people can prepare for the energy prices for next winter, but also with the longer-term changes that are required to help people heat and insulate their homes better, and how the energy system needs to change. And then Mark provided more detail about that with inspiration from Europe, and talked to us about how community energy could grow and start that transformation and that transition that he feels is required to increase the democratisation of energy, and at the same time reduce the cost of energy and get more people involved and more communities involved. Michaela's presentation highlighted the challenges with the sector, which is reliant on volunteers, and I do think there was a consensus in the chat that groups do need paid members of staff, and this would actually help maximise the input and the value of volunteer support. And professional organisations working and using a volunteer workforce is a tried and tested model. I mean, the National Trust and the RHS both use a paid member of staff, but rely on huge numbers of volunteers to deliver the services that they have across the country. And then Kate's also highlighted how the sector has always been innovative, and that it will continue to do so. And that's one of the things that's always amazed me working with the community energy sector, is whatever problem or barrier you put in its way, it works out a way around it. It's always looking at a new different market opportunity and a new different business model to maximise the value of that market opportunity for the communities and to get their projects delivered. So I think we've had a fantastic conversation this morning. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and I hope you've all enjoyed being part of it. Thank you once again to our Soapbox speakers. And now I think I'll hand over to Philip to close the event. You're a bit patchy again, Philip.
How is that? I think that's better.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, thank you very much, Helen. A big thank you to you for chairing today and the useful summary at the end. That's much appreciated. And thank you to all the speakers for taking the time to be with us and share their thoughts and opinions. it's great looking ahead to the exciting future of the sector, seeing where it can go, also seeing the variety of opinions and experiences from within the sector. As we know, it is very varied, and that's one of the amazing parts of community energy. So just some concluding practicalities. Any resources that you've heard about, we'll go through the chat and put any links in, as well as I'm sure hopefully Ollie and the Unity team will be okay sharing their presentations. We'll send those out to you. I'd also like to tell you about some Community Energy England events and things coming up soon. So Community Energy Fortnight 2022 runs from the 11th to the 24th of June. That's a big sort of event within the sector. And we encourage everyone to get involved in the fortnight by organising your own events and activities. It's a great opportunity to engage with your local community, a bit of sector-wide momentum behind something that you might be doing locally. There are various events already kind of coming up to do with sharing learning and expertise, things about funding, things about again, the future of the sector, but also the local things like tours of solar parks and wind turbines, that sort of thing. So have a think about what you can do and how you can be part of the fortnight. It's a good way, as well as acting in your local community, to show others around the country what you've been doing. If you're doing online, you can do online events like this, share something that you've been working on, a success, it's something that you've implemented and that you want to tell others about. We will launch our comms pack for the fortnight tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that coming via email, and it will be on our website as well. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, you can do that on our website and then you'll be on the list. And if you're going to run an event, which we hope you will, please let us know about it so we can promote it on social media. We put it on our website and it can form a part of the fortnight. That's great. Within the fortnight, on Saturday the 18th of June, we'll be hosting our flagship summer conference. So the first time that Community Energy England is back with a conference in person since 2019. So we're really looking forward to that, and we hope that we'll see many of you there. Although it's based in Bristol, we will be making sure that it's got content that's relevant for everyone around the country, to hopefully draw you down and give you a chance to meet and connect with others in the sector. It's free event, but places are limited, so please do book as soon as you can. Also coming up, we'll be launching publishing a report about the reach and impact of community energy organisations on their members and networks very soon. We hope that will be some good evidence and stats that you might be able to use when you're talking to others about the value of community energy. And in the summer, of course, keep an eye out as well for this year's State of the Sector report, which will be coming out. So lastly, Community Energy England is a membership organisation. We act as the voice of the sector. As you've heard today, there's a huge amount going on in the sector and the energy system at large. And now more than ever, the sector needs the collective voice that we provide and the networks and sharing of learning and new business models. That is the core of what we do. If your organisation isn't already a member, please do join CEE. You'll be adding to our collective voice and become part of our network and help our work continue. Membership information is all on our website, and the link is in the chat. Thank you again, everyone, for attending today's event. It's great to see lots of you here. Thank you for participating with your comments and questions. Thank you again to the speakers and Helen, and we look forward to seeing you in the summer. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.